In this year's India and Kathmandu and Bibhu India-Nepal Foundation warmly welcomes you all to this 14th edition of Voices. In the last edition of Voices, we had with us CNN hero Puspa Basnet speaking on her butterfly work. Today, in this 14th edition of Voices, we have a very eminent poet from India, Mr. Bibhu, who come all the way from India to have a talk with us on the title Poetry and Beyond and his works. He will share about us with his works too. To briefly introduce them, Bibhu Padhi started writing since 1975 and began having poems published in all the major Indian literary journals that included Debonair, the Illustrated Weekly, Imprint, Indian Literature and Quest. Outside India, his poems have been published in many other journals including Encounter, Orbis, Outpost, New Letters, Southwest Review and the Toronto South Asian Review. A selection appeared in New Voices, 8 contemporary poets. He has edited a number of poetry anthologies and is a counselor in creative writing with the Indira Gandhi National Open University in Delhi. His critical writing on D.H. Lawrence and Indian philosophy and religion, a reader guide, co-written with his wife, who is present with us today, has been published in the USA. His own first collection, Going to the Temple, 1988, was published to considerable acclaim from, among others, James Kirkham, H.J. Kennedy, Tess Gallagher, James Merrill, William Stafford, and Richard Wilbur. Can we please give him a big round of applause? He will speak with us about his experiences and on poetry and beyond for like 40 minutes. And after that, we will open the floor for all of you to interact with him. May I also request Secretary of Bibhu India-Nepal Foundation and Head of Press Information and Culture at the India-Nepal to kindly share a few words with us before we begin the talk.
I wish you a very happy afternoon, because poetry makes me happy and I think it could be a happy afternoon indeed. We are very delighted and very privileged and honored to have poet Bibhu Padhi in Kathmandu. It has taken me almost a year to bring him here. We have been planning this visit since last 1 year and it has finally happened now. And I'm so happy that he had a look at the city. So it's his third or his fourth day already here, and I'm sure he will also share a little bit of, besides his poetry, about Kathmandu, which turns every month once into Poemandu. So Bibhu is one, he's a great poet, I must say, and without pretensions. I know hundreds of poets, and all of them great in their own respect, in their own the way they write their poetry. But what really appeals me about Bibhu is that he's so down to earth, and he's so helpful. So these two qualities, I think, being able to take along others with you, and despite your greatness, being humble, I think these are the two qualities which oozes out from this poet friend of mine. And but most important of all, besides these two qualities, is his poetry, which this is a book of his selected poems, and once you read it, the language itself is so exalting. You feel where you are, from where these words are coming. Are they coming from somebody who has been on earth, or is it coming from somebody who is far away from, who is somewhere, who is at the earth but at the same time floating in space? And one of his poems, look at one of my favorites from this collection of selected poems, which I want to share with you before he starts. It's called Konark 2. Konark is a famous temple in Odisha, you all know. And I touch the stones cold. Let my lean fingers move over its surface and received by its quiet outside. Somewhere in the gathering dark, a smile is known and soon forgotten. And then a whisper, a rush of seaweed over the stark sand that holds the weight of centuries. The thought of a distant sacrifice. I walk past the naked bodies and feet, past gestures of love and renewal, the long-awaited anguish of fulfillment. I bury in the sand the sound of my mortal feet. The hard stones begin to thaw and spread even as I hear the unheard, slow dance of other feet. Between the thawing stones, a child's lisping voice banished by our memory and irrelevant past. How does one remember things? Who shall hear my words? Except the silence is deep beneath stones. From chance meetings, what reward, what most glory drifts in there. That's it. So over to the person please today.
Good afternoon, friends. I'm really grateful to ATDC, particularly to Abhay and Pankaj, who invited me to read from my poems. I never thought that I would be speaking to such a big audience. I'm really afraid of speaking to a large audience. I've been teaching for the last 36 years, but they are students and they take in whatever I say. I'm sure this audience is not like this. They don't take me everything I say. Now, let me tell you a few things about how I started writing poetry. In the beginning, when I was an MA student, I wrote very mushy, romantic poems. A little later, when I passed my MA exam, I sent a few of not these poems, newer poems, to British Nandi, who is famous now for other things, films and other things, advertising. To British Nandi, who was the editor of Dialogue India. I sent him about 5 or 6 poems and he returned by saying that these poems were extraordinary. I didn't believe him. Now after that I stopped writing poetry, which is published in Dialogue India, and I stopped writing poetry until 1975. What really triggered my poem? In 1974, December, I have been suffering from migraine for the last so many years, ever since I was an MA student. At that time also, I also suffered from migraine. On one day, I was having a terrible bout of migraine. I went to a chemist's shop and asked if there is something that could help me. He gave me a medicine which had come new to the shops called Coldering. And I took 3 Coldering tablets in empty stomach. That actually cut the stomach wall, and then I vomited blood. As the doctors say, about 2.5 liters of blood. And then I was transferred to the SCP Medical College Hospital. I stayed there for about a month or so. Now, during my stay there, I saw so many dying all around me. I thought why I was not dying. The doctors took good care of me. But death was there and was looking at my face, looked into my eyes. Now, after returning from the hospital, I wrote 2 poems. A poem divided into 2 sections, really, and called From the Extra Medical Ward. Now, they were the first poems I wrote, after which I wrote consciously and seriously. So that was in 1975. So I have been writing for the last so many years. I published many books, 9 books. Now people ask me, how does a poem come? I tell them that as far as I am concerned, one should wait for the poem to come. One should not hurry. I have been waiting for the poems to come. A word here, applause there, may trigger off the poem. I look for the first line of the poem. Now once I have the first line or the last line, I sit down to write my poetry. I haven't told something about what happened later, much later, 1991. I suddenly fell into a deep depression and have been suffering from depression since those days. My friends say, my good wife says that periods of depression are actually very creative periods. I think I believe them. In 1991, I was invited to the Iowa International Writing Program for 3 months, after which I would have been a professor, an assistant professor of English and creative writing at University of Maryland, United States. I said yes to these, but when the letters came confirming my going, I suddenly said no. So India went unrepresented at the Iowa International Writing Program in the year 1991. Both Iowa and University of Maryland kept my file open for the next year. To the Iowa people I say that I would recommend somebody. I cannot go myself. I recommended somebody and he went. Now University of Maryland said they also kept my file open for 1 whole year. In fact, in their catalog, they had printed courses that I would have given, at the end of which appeared the name Professor Padhi. That was, I politely declined that too. Now, you might ask me about the influences on my poetry, who have influenced me. When I was a student of the intermediate science class, My favorite poets were Robert Frost and E. E. Cummings. So they have had their influences on me. But the most influential one were Dhananda Mahapatra and Pritish Nandi. I tried to copy them initially. I think now I'm out of them, so to speak. I have been influenced mostly by the European poets like Quasimodo, Ungaretti, George Cervantes, and by the Latin American Chilean poet Pablo Neruda. They have all influenced me. When poets are asked, who are the influences on you? They normally say, oh no, I haven't been influenced by anyone. They're actually telling you a lie. If you see a beautiful woman, you are influenced by her. A handsome couple, you are influenced by them. So influences will be there, whether you like it or not. In a conference which was on Poetry is Dead, that was the theme of the conference. I was asked whether poetry was dead. I said, no, poetry can never be dead. Maybe few people read poetry, but those who read them very seriously. Now, I want to know how you react to my poems. I shall begin reading. I will not harass you with many poems. I will just read about 5 or 6. First of all, let me read that poem from the extra-medical ward. I am grateful to the 2 dead, on each of whom these 2 poems are based. From the extra-medical ward. You pull down the slender oxygen tube and let your sweat dry to the savage hours of the night. You let your body lose its native heat, its last lingering shine. You remember the early morning voices and how little they meant to you. Now that you are beginning to feel, they will examine the intricate maneuverings of the soul. I saw you from a space of difference, felt near my lips your warm departing breath. I watched how my cousin's fresh blood danced into my life drop by drop. As the day was wearing off, qualified men quietly brought back their old indifference to going things and stopped your dark blind look from the general eye. You never let your good wife know, although now it hardly mattered. Your soul had sent its message of love into her ears, and so you straightened your body and waited for the final nightfall. The second poem, it's about a child who died of, what is it called? I become yellow. Jaundice, died of jaundice. He thought the he here is the boy's father. Very, very handsome boy, very handsome. He thought he was the Lord of the world. now that he had finally brought his deaf-mute boy to such a large hospital. My interfering mother made all the inquiries, stupid in their own ways. How it came, what exactly happened, can he make proper gestures now that her arms are losing their strength under the pressure of the knife of weight. Under my eyes I have seen his teeth clenching pain, his body take the color of falling leaves, his innocent flower-like eyes turn yellow at their edges. I've asked my daughters to read from the Holy Quran every day. Believe me, the wise men of my village have assured me that if he survives the 8th night, he can eat his favorite cashew nuts again. That night, I invented new language to console the old man, who raised his thin, wrinkled arms onto Allah, his modest tears lurking at the corners of his eyes. Before the next sun had touched the sky, the boy opened his eyes, saw his world of small, unremembered things, close at his fingertips, and died. Now a poem on Qatar, to which I really belong, Manchester House. This particular, the first poem that I'm going to read, was rejected by the Illustrated Weekly of India. Then Gandhi said, you send it to Poetry Chicago, it will be published. I sent it on to Poetry Chicago and it was accepted. Rains in Qatar. In the afternoons, the whisper over the roadside fields, around my waterproof room in crystal-cut forms. Their sharp geometrical angles drain the needle-thin leaves, now weakened by the summer typhoid. Their rough and rotting fingers dishevel the chaste and religious casualties into bare, bathing figures. Their cool and miraculous hands raise the sky breeze in the dust-brown grass under my feet. Stretch them about me. Dear Mother, if you will allow me, I shall make the mud green carpet mine and make full use of it while the rains about Qatar are whispering still. This is the last rain. It's dedicated to my poet friend, American poet friend, William Meredith. Their long arrivals have turned episodic now. Now they come between long waitings. They do not embrace the earth anymore with that perfect angular gesture of a kind mother. They have lost their old sense of touch, their feeling of growth and new life. My trees are dry now, like my own fingers. They no longer bear the smell of wet green and loving rain. The last rains are falling now. On the mango tree, widespread against the sky, on my closed lips, on the seeds of winter, softly, on the last big blade of grass, let them fall. This poem is on Shiva. I know how your darkness invades my little house and makes it your own. I know how within your kingdom everything is simplified and remembered. I'm absorbed into your precious sea, sucked into the finality of its cool, depthless waters. I'm consumed by your dark and savage strength, fulfilled in your whirlpools of annihilation. And I hear myself gently opening within your darkness, full of hope, like a brideless newborn leaf. Here is a poem I wrote for my first son. I seem to know all about you, your time, your place, your name. The clean Indian wheat color of your skin, your unpolished words. But I know that there are also sounds that you do not know, shapes that you wouldn't recognize. For instance, the owl's lean, dark cry, or the sea at Puri during a small moon's night. And at this hour, when you are breathing so quietly beside your mother, I seem to hear a faraway whisper that almost tells me you are not mine. I hear the owl's cry, the gentle expanding roar of the blue waters of Puri. Never mind, I know where my night sleeps, undisturbed by every sound and thought, so peacefully. And the last poem, Trees. Actually, the poem begins with a kind of prologue. There are 2 lines from an anonymous Chinese poet. Be still, my heart. These great trees are prayers. Be still, my heart. These great trees are prayers. Since the time I began to remember, they have been here, standing perfectly still and erect, as angels do. Shades of green come and go, and perhaps the barks fall off where no one sees. During the day, under the tropic rain, their leaves shine as emeralds do on the goddess's ancient body. Under the moon's light, words move through the distances from one to the other until each one receives the message of the night. As we walk down the road hand in hand, my son says, I am 6. But how old are these trees? I take time's help about how a tree is born of the sea, how the sapling grows and waits for the rain to wash it clean, how freely the leaves accept every small piece. Just like you, I tell him. And as he laughs and we walk further down the road, I ask, can you tell what color are the leaves? Easy, he says, they are green. But tell me, how old are they? He repeats his question, but this time I am quick to answer, they are 6. I thought the same when I walked this road holding my father's hand 29 years ago and was told they are 6. Perhaps I still think they are so. Somewhere at some unfrequented corner of the mind, the trees are always 6, young and shining above us as angels do. The barks will keep falling. The leaf will take on shades of green I might not know. The ancient messages will continue to be transmitted through the night. Perhaps several years from now, my son, holding his son's hand, would walk down the same road and hear the same old question, how old are these trees? And hear the answer, they are 6. Thank you. If you have any questions,
if you have any questions, kepada Kesul nama aku tu wants to interact with the comments through.
anything like publishing, if you are a poet or trying to be a poet yourself, you can ask me how to publish, where to publish, and so on.
This is a very welcome to Nepal, and I would like to ask you a question. Sir, I would like to ask if there is any techniques to write a poem, because I am a learner. I am starting to write a poet, or to write some literatures. So I would like to ask if there is any techniques. I say in Hindi, कोई ऐसी बारीकियाँ हैं जिसे हम बोल सकते हैं, हिंदी में ऐसी बारीकियाँ हैं जिसे हम कविता लिख सकते हैं कि जस्ट या अपना जस्ट फीलिंग जो मन में आती है उसे सिर्फ कागज के पन्नों पे उतारना सिर्फ कविता बन जाती है, या कोई बारीकियाँ ऐसी है, किस बारीकियाँ, उसके बारे में हमें बताएं प्लीज।
Technique to है कविता लिखने में। There are many techniques embedded in the poem, but to start with, you need not bother about technique. You write what the heart, what your heart wants you to write. Later on, you may think about technique. Technique is not the first thing. If you have poems with you, which you have brought here, please let me read them. Or you can read them yourself. Thank you.
Any further questions?
Mr. Padhi, it's an honor and a pleasure to have you in Kathmandu. My name is Padhi. I'm an artist and a poet. Firstly, about your depression, I think all creative people go through this. I have a little anxiety myself. And the reason why we have this anxiety and depression is probably because artists and writers, we are very, very sensitive. And that's the reason why we feel things that others don't. And we get to show to the whole wide world that, this is this, and then the others say, oh yes. That's one thing. And the other thing is, we talked about, waiting for the poetry to happen to you. But are there times when your creativity gets very, very barren, and you have this long periods of time when you don't write anything? How are you then? Do you get very cranky and irritated at this spans of time?
Sir, the last man.
When you go through this, are there times when you go barren, you don't create anything?
There have been times when I haven't written anything. One was from 81 to 85, 4 years, when I wrote not a single poem. And from 92 to 97, when I wrote trash and threw them away. There are these phases, there have been these phases.
So how are you when you are going through these phases? Are you very cranky and irritated?
I'm cranky, no doubt. Otherwise I would have had this depression.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your discourse and presentation. My name is Mohan Lohani, an English speaker. Like the young man a little while ago, you advised him not to think about the technique. But I am not mistaken. You said you told us about your technique. You said, I write the first line and then the last line. Is it not technique? Then how do you connect the first line and the last line? Maintaining the logical coherence.
The last line is rare to come. Normally the first line comes. Now there is a phrase, someone else says. I wanted to keep that phrase in my last line, and I succeeded when I wrote a poem called Grandmother's Soil of Wheat. They are normally the first lines which strike you, and you have to wait for them. The waiting is the most important thing in poetry. In novel you can plot, you can write anything you want, but in poetry you have to be a little cautious in your waiting. Sometimes lines come at night and you would say that I'll get up next day and write down the lines, but it vanishes. So I would request you, whenever such a line comes, to keep your notepad ready so that you can take them down.
Any more questions?
It was a great experience listening to you, your experience as a poet and your poetry as well. My name is Prakash Trivedi and I also try to write a little bit. Because you have a very long career as a poet, I wanted to know from you, because I think at present we are living at a time when poetry in a way it is at its lowest time, and also a time when we need poetry the most. That's what I feel. So what I would like to know from you is, are there any things that the aspiring poets or even the established poets should avoid because they have a very, very long experience? Is there anything that those who want to be poets or those who have been writing poetry should avoid, should not be doing? Thank you.
I think there is something called apprenticeship. Understand? I was an apprentice to Jantama Patra, who taught me initially what poetry was. So I wrote my poems and showed them to him. He told me what was good, what was bad, and how it could be better, and so on. Now, if you have been writing poetry, sir, you can send them on to me via email. I will read and get back to you. I promise that. And you can take from me or my wife my email address.
Do you write mostly in English, or you also write in Oriya or Hindi? And if you write in languages other than English, who does the translation? You translate it yourself or somebody else?
I write in Oriya also. I started writing in Oriya in 1993. Two of my books have been published, and the third book is awaiting publication. I translated the Jnanapith awardee Sitakantu Mahapatra into English, as well as a poet whom I like very much, Vivek Jena, who was a very neglected figure in Oriya poetry. I have translated him also, selected poems from Sitakantu Mahapatra and selected poems from Vivek Jena. Any other questions?
Manju Kachuli, I write poetry, and I was very much fascinated with your poems here. They are very nice, and I like to listen more again if time permits. And I'm very much interested to know, especially the writers are very much influenced by their own experiences, by the social affairs, by their culture, and national and international affairs, and all these things. Which of all these things influence you much more in your life to write poetry? Thank you.
I think it's my family and my friends, nature. About my sleeplessness, about my pain, not only my pain but other kinds of emotional pain. And of course, what is happening in the outer space, far away, as I say, far away from us.
Any more questions? I would like to ask a question to sir. They often say that translation kills the essence of the original poem. How much do you believe in that, and how to create a balance between them?
My poems have been translated into several languages, including Greek, Macedonian. I cannot read these books, of course. Sorry, could you say that again?
They often say that a translation kills the original essence of the original poem.
It's very difficult, in fact. So you have to be efficient in both the languages. The language into which the poem is translated and the language in which the poem is written. And you have to be familiar, the translated poem must sound like an original one. Otherwise, it feeds itself brand. The poem itself feeds itself brand.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any further questions?
When you sit for writing, or a poet sits for writing a poem, he always thinks of writing or creating a good stuff. But sometimes it happens like that the poem is not well received by audience. And there are two factors, like our feelings and our thoughts. While writing a poem, it comes together. So to create a good stuff, the poet should give priority to either for our feelings or our thoughts. Create a good stuff.
Could you say all that again? I'm a little absent-minded.
No, when a poet sits for writing poem, he always thinks of creating a good stuff. Yeah. So he thinks of writing a good poem, and all his works are not well received, or the results or outputs does not come as he thinks. So to create a good stuff, to write a good poem, the writer or the poet should give priority to his feelings or his thoughts while writing a poem.
I think the poet should give priority to his experience and not to what the critics say. Your book might get a very bad review, but never will be certain. I for myself, I tell you, if my poetry gets 5 readers, 5 good readers, I wouldn't care about the 100 bad readers I have.
I believe that all forms of art, the feelings are the most important elements. You have a beautiful sense of poetry, very, very candid, very, very simple. Could you tell us about your writing process? When you sit down and write, do you get back to it and make corrections and edit them? Or are you happy at the first go? That's one thing. And the other question I have for you is the inculcation of intellectual contents, if I may. Is it important that do you think that the intellectual content should come on its own, or do you sometimes sit down and say, okay, this is a poem that I need to write for this certain thing?
There was a time when every morning, early morning, around 4:35, I used to get up and sit at the table and try to write a poem. It was a period of apprenticeship for myself. Whether the poem came or not, I stood at the table, I sat at the table for 1 hour. The poem came, it didn't come. You say that all forms of art are similar. You meant that. You didn't say but you meant that. Yes, I say they are similar. I'm always reminded of the German philosopher Schopenhauer's words. All art aspires to the condition of music. All art aspires to the condition of music. And I'm reminded of Sri Aurobindo saying that you will see that in a few years, poetry will be mantric, it will be like mantra. And I believe this will be coming true in the next few years to come.
I truly agree with Prakash Subedi, a very celebrated poet in our community. My question would be relating to that. Now that poetry, I mean, we're very happy that we have this big audience today, but there are a lot of times when poetry gatherings comprise of just a few people. So what are the ways in which we can celebrate and promote poetry, you think?
Very difficult question. I'll take my time to answer.
Sure. Or you can skip this too, if this is a hard one.
People like Amar should be there.
You have to make fusion of, I think, poetry and how it's happening these days. You have now spoken poetry, and poetry was spoken all the time since centuries, because poetry was always an oral art. It then became the written art, and poets started reading their poems from the book rather than reciting their poems, So, and on the other thing, which Neruda said that, poetry was always, first of all, a priest's vocation. So poet's vocation was the priest's vocation. And the poets disguised themselves as priests for centuries, because they could not openly say that, I am a poet. How many of you can really say I am a poet? You try to get around, I'm I teach English but also write poetry. But I'm not a poet. So this, I think poetry, the good poetry, since century has been, in domain of priesthood, and has come as, Rigveda. If you look at the Vedas, if you look at the Irish, ancient Irish texts, I was listening to I think Amaraki, and amazing songs. I mean, these are great mantras. Sanskrit, look at Sanskrit poetry, which I think Schopenhauer was very influenced with. So, I want to ask you this question, the journey from Illustrated Wiki of India to Poetry Chicago. So how does, the editor of poetry of the Illustrated Wiki of India who rejected your poem on, Rains in Qatar, and which was published by Poetry Chicago. So that often happens, so where, what's the difference between a good poem and, and a good and an average poem, and also people who could look at good poems, obviously it doesn't mean that Poetry Chicago has a better taste than Illustrated Wiki of India, but this subjectivity of taste itself in poetry. What is a good poem? What is a bad poem? If you could throw some light on that.
A single word can make a poem great, and a single word can make a poem bad. You should be very careful about the words. They are tricksters. Words are tricksters. I believe Gauri Deshpande, who was the editor of the poetry page of the Illustrated Weekly of India, missed the phrase, a particular phrase, and the editor of the Poetry Chicago liked that particular phrase. If you remember, it was like summer typhoid. That was when Poetry Chicago editor wrote to me. He said that I'm accepting this poem because of these beautiful two words, like summer typhoid. After that, I published several times in Poetry Chicago, but since then, I have been getting rejected notes from Poetry Chicago also. These rejections the poet should not be, shouldn't be afraid of these rejections. They are part of the poet's life, part of the painter's life. If something is not accepted, you shouldn't be rejected at all. You should believe in yourself. You should believe in yourself. And everyone knows what is good, what is bad. You can be your best judge. हिंदी में बोलो, मैं बाद में
ठीक है सर। सर मैं अपने आप को बहुत दिनों से, पिछले कुछ दिनों ही नहीं, बहुत दिनों से मुझे कंफ्यूजन हो रही है सर कि वास्तविक में गजल और कविता में क्या फर्क है सर। गजल भी देखता हूँ तो वैसे ही दिखता है, कविता भी दिखता हूँ तो वैसे ही दिखती है सर। और मैंने ये बात नोटिस की है कि जो लव या प्रेम या प्यार से संबंधित कुछ लोग लिख देते हैं उसको गजल बोलते हैं, अथवा कोई गजल के रूप में लिखते हैं। और दूसरे कोई सब वस्तु स्थिति के बारे में, वस्तु के बारे में अगर लिखी हो तो वो कविता के रूप में आती है। सर ये क्या है, ये माजरा क्या है, थोड़ा हमको समझाइएगा सर।
Prose has its own rhythm, and poetry has its own rhythm. What we write these days are free verse. They can be read as prose, they can be read as poetry. What is important is there are several devices which help the poet in retaining that poetry-like quality, like internal rhymes. A single line has two words rhyming with each other. देखेंगे, बोलेंगे, जैसे इधर होता है, वैसे. So the internal rhyme is very important in poetry.
मैं इसका उत्तर दे देता हूँ। गजल और कविता में वही अंतर है जो एंजेलिना जूली और प्रियंका कार्की में है।
A to Z, this 26 letters are not enough to express whatever, to speak whatever heart was, and how you balance this in your poems, any technique?
What to balance? What with what?
Letters or words, in fact, with the may I speak in Hindi?
Sure.
तो 26वां लेटर में तो हमारा दिल जो कहता है, हमारा फीलिंग जो आता है वो सब समा नहीं सकते. Words जो है ना, these are not enough to express what we want really, and how you balance this in your poems.
There are times when words don't occur to me. When the feelings overcome the words, the feelings overcome the words. The words are not up to the feelings. Understand? Then I look for new words, or if they don't come, I go to other feelings.
Just to kill the confusion, Robert Frost, he gave a very good definition of poetry, and that's a poet is when an emotion has found a thought, and that thought has found words. That's what a poem is. So I think it begins with emotions. You give shape, emotions find a shape in a thought, and then finally you choose the appropriate words, and then it turns out to be a poem. You can introduce yourself.
Yeah. I am Sirish Pradhan. I represent PTI here, Press Trust of India. Just I have one small remarks. I have heard that was one of the poets of Nepal. Famous poet, I forgot when he said that. I said in Nepali, Kavita, Kavi host, Kavita, Kavi host, Kavi Kavita host, सबको कविता हुन्छ शब्द थुपारी गरेको हुन्छन् आउट भएको हुन्छ so poem is not just the accumulation of words, it's the feeling of emotions and so what is your response to this?
There are times when I play with words also. I play with words as the painters who play with colors. I play with words. There are times when I am very flamboyant and play with words. There are times when I am very humble and treat them as friends or priests, as says. The words as priests. I give them the respect they deserve. But there have been many occasions when I have played with words. But these poems I haven't published anywhere. I know that these poems were dishonest.
I'll repeat question, Lisa.
Feelings come in my heart to write poem, but it only becomes one paragraph or two paragraphs. I mean one stanza, only two stanza. When
Why she whenever she writes a poem, it's only one or two paragraphs. Why is this?
My recent poems, most recent poems, have only 2 or 3 line stanzas. I cannot go beyond the 3 lines or 2 line stanzas. It has been very spare, very spare. So you need not be bothered by 1 stanza or 2 stanzas, as you say, 1 paragraph or 2 paragraphs. You just continue to write. Please continue to write. Don't bother about paragraphs or stanzas.
There's a difference between, being a poet and your recognition as a poet by the society. So when you write poetry, it's a very personal affair. You are only sketching at a blank page with your pen. That's what you all have. But then, when you want to be recognized as a poet, then you